Hello and welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're asking something that feels, well, pretty fundamental right now. Can anyone actually afford to live in Britain anymore? It's a huge question.
It really is. And
But
that feeling, that sense that a decent home is slipping out of reach for so many people, it's not just a feeling, is it? There are real complex reasons behind it.
exactly. We're going to try and unpack some of that today. The crazy prices, the planning rules, the politics behind it all.
The tangled web.
Definitely. And helping us untangle it is James Cartwright. James is an urban policy analyst, a housing campaigner, and author of the book Brick by Brick, Rebuilding Britain's Housing Future.
Thanks. Good to be diving into this again. It's crucial.
So let's jump right in. Why are we in this mess? How did the UK's housing situation get quite so bad?
Well, look, it didn't happen overnight. This is something that's built up over decades, really. A big part of it, maybe the simplest part, is we just haven't built enough homes for a long, long time.
Right, just a basic supply issue.
A fundamental supply issue, yeah. But then you layer on specific policies. Think about right to buy.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s.
Okay. Empowering for many at the time, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It gave lots of people the chance to own their home. But, and this is the crucial bit, the council houses that were sold off weren't replaced. Not nearly enough, anyway.
Ah, okay. So you sell off affordable stock.
And you don't build new affordable stock to replace it. So over time, that pool of genuinely affordable housing just shrinks and shrinks. The policy maybe achieved one aim, but it had this massive knock-on effect down the line on affordability overall.
That makes sense. And you hear so much about planning being a nightmare, too. Is that part of this decades-long story?
Oh, absolutely. Our planning system,
Mm.
it's often described as, well, restrictive, bureaucratic. It makes getting permission to build new homes a really slow, often uncertain process.
So you've got this lack of building fewer council homes.
Exactly. Combine that limited supply with, growing demand, more people, smaller households, plus wages, not really keeping up for a lot of folks.
Yeah, wage stagnation is a huge factor.
Huge. And then add in property being seen as a really attractive investment, sometimes speculative investment, where the main goal is profit from rising prices rather than providing homes. You mix all that
They
together,
have to get a crisis.
you get a perfect storm for unaffordable housing. And it's important to say, this isn't really about blaming one government. It's systemic. It's built up over labor, conservative governments, coalitions.
Right. And the impact feels very generational now, doesn't it? Younger people seem to face a totally different reality than their parents or grandparents did.
Completely different. The barriers to entry, whether buying or even renting securely, are just so much higher.
You mentioned investment and politics. It feels like owning a home in the UK it's more than just bricks and mortar, isn't it? It's tied up with identity, security.
Massively so. Homeownership has this deep cultural resonance here. It's linked to stability, aspiration, achieving a certain status.
Yeah.
And politically, that's had real consequences.
How so? Did policies actively try to link ownership and politics?
Well, certainly the big expansion of homeownership in the 80s, driven by right to buy and other factors, did coincide with shifts in how some people voted. It created a larger block of homeowner voters.
Okay. So how does that translate into today's problems? Does that political weight make it harder to fix things?
Yeah, I think it does, in several ways. Think about local politics. Who turns out to vote in local elections? Often it's established homeowners.
Right.
And understandably, they might be concerned about new developments potentially affecting their property value, or changing the local area, or straining services. This can lead to councils being very cautious, sometimes resistant, to approving new housing. It's that classic NMBEBism thing, not in my backyard.
So local democracy, in a way, can actually block new housing needed for others.
It can inadvertently end up prioritizing the concerns of existing homeowners who vote over the needs of people desperate for somewhere to live, whether that's renters or potential first-time buyers. It creates a real barrier to boosting supply where it's needed most.
It almost sounds like there's a built-in incentive, maybe unspoken, to keep supply tight to protect existing values.
Look, no politician is going to say, we want house prices to be unaffordable. But the structure of the system, particularly locally, the way planning decisions are made, the influence of homeowner groups, it can definitely work to limit new supply and, as a consequence, keep prices high. The political incentives often align with a restricting development.
Which brings us back squarely to the planning system itself. You said it's restrictive. Why is it so difficult to get things built? What's wrong with the rules?
Well, a lot of the framework we use today, believe it or not, it kind of originates from just after World War II.
Really? That long ago?
Yeah, the basic principles. And while the aims were good, preventing sprawl, coordinating development, it's become incredibly complex over time. Local plans that are meant to guide development, they're often years out of date.
Mm.
There's also a huge amount of discretion given to local planning authorities and councilors. There isn't always a clear yes or no based on rules. It can be quite subjective. And there's just so many points in the process where a proposal can be vetoed or delayed.
So it's not just red tape. It's uncertainty and potential roadblocks everywhere.
Exactly. That uncertainty and delay adds cost for developers. Big costs. And guess who ultimately pays for that?
Buyers and renters.
Precisely. It gets passed on. So the planning system itself, its complexity and delays, directly fuels unaffordability.
So just to be clear, it isn't that we've physically run out of space to build in Britain.
Oh, not at all. That's a common misconception. It's about the rules governing how and where we can build and how complex and slow that process is. There's often a lack of clear signals or incentives for councils to actually say yes to good development proposals.
What about the green belt? That always comes up. Is it the big blocker people say it is? Is it all just precious countryside?
The Greenbelt is, well, it's complicated. It was set up with good intentions. Stop cities sprawling endlessly, protect the countryside near urban areas. And some of it absolutely does that. It's valuable green space.
Right.
But over time, its function has become partly political too. Some land designated as Greenbelt isn't exactly, pristine wilderness. Some of it is pretty poor quality land, and you could argue its main function there is less environmental and more about protecting the amenity and property values of people living in or near it by preventing nearby development.
So it potentially locks up land that could be used near where people need homes.
It raises that difficult question, yes. Whose interest is all of the Greenbelt serving today? Is the balance right between environmental protection and the need for housing?
Okay, so planning is tough. But even when things do get built, or for existing properties, the cost, buying or renting, is just astronomical for so many. What's pushing those prices and rents up so relentlessly?
Well, on the buying side, it's that huge gap we mentioned. Prices have generally shot up over the last few decades, while typical wages haven't, not nearly at the same pace. So affordability ratios are just stretched incredibly thin.
And renting, it feels like rents are spiraling too, especially in cities.
Definitely. The private rented sector has grown massively, partly fueled by buy-to-let investment. Now that provides homes, but the dynamic can be different sometimes. The focus is understandably on the investment return. Then you got things like short-term lets, Airbnb style.
Right, taking properties out of the long-term rental market.
Exactly. In tourist hot spots or city centers, that can reduce the supply available for people who actually live and work there. And don't forget, overseas investment, London property, UK property generally, is seen as a safe haven for money, which can also push up prices at the top end with knock-on effects.
And what about people who simply can't afford those private rents? What's happened to social housing?
Yeah, that's a really crucial part of the picture. The social housing sector, council housing, housing association homes, it's shrunk dramatically. We talked about right to buy selling off over 1.5 million council homes since the 80s.
And they weren't replaced.
Not at the scale needed, and often not at the same deep level of affordability. So the safety net, the truly affordable option for people on lower incomes, has frayed significantly. Plus, you've got things like caps on housing benefit, which often don't cover the actual market rent, especially in expensive areas.
Wow. It does paint a pretty bleak picture. It feels quite overwhelming. Are there actually solutions? What could we realistically do?
Yes, absolutely. It's not an impossible problem, though it is difficult. There are definitely things that can make a big difference.
Like what?
Well, first off, a really major long-term commitment to building social housing again. Genuinely affordable homes at scale. That's fundamental.
Okay. Build more social homes. What else?
Planning reform is unavoidable. We need to make the system quicker, clearer, and more supportive of building the homes we need, especially things like gentle densification in urban areas, building slightly more densely around transport hubs, for instance.
Make it easier to build in the right places.
Exactly. And maybe policies to discourage land banking, where developers sit on land with planning permission without actually building, waiting for prices to rise further. Penalties could encourage faster build-out.
Right. What about renters?
Making renting more secure is vital. Longer tenancies, maybe some form of rent stabilization in the hottest markets, give renters more stability and fairer terms.
These all sound like sensible ideas on paper, but making them happen. That sounds politically very tough. You'd be taking on some powerful interests.
That's the absolute crux of it. Real reform means challenging the status quo. It might mean some homeowners see less house price growth or developers face different regulations. It takes genuine political courage to push through changes that benefit the wider population but might upset some established groups.
Is there any sign of that courage? Are politicians starting to grasp the nettle?
Well, you hear more talk about it, definitely.
Yeah.
Labor's talking about big building targets. Even within the conservatives, there's more acknowledgement that things can't go on like this. People recognize it's becoming a major social and economic problem.
But talk is one thing.
Talk is one thing, action is another. Translating that recognition into actual, effective policies that survive the political pressures. That's the massive challenge. The details of how any reforms are done and whether governments stick with them will be key.
Absolutely. Now, to really bring home what this all means for people on the ground, we asked listeners from different parts of the UK to share their experiences. Let's have a listen.
Okay.
Pause! Wow. Hearing those stories from Leeds, Croydon, Glasgow,
Yep.
it really puts the policy discussion into sharp focus, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Those personal stories, they just underline the human reality of this crisis. It's not abstract numbers or graphs. It's people's security, their family life, their hopes for the future being profoundly affected. It really hits home.
James, thank you. That was incredibly insightful, really helping us navigate this complex issue.
My pleasure. It's vital we keep talking about it.
So just to try and pull the threads together from our deep dive today, it's clear the UK housing crisis isn't simple. It's this tangled knot of issues built up over decades.
Deep roots.
Yeah. We've talked about years of not building enough homes, the impact of right to buy, shrinking the social housing stock without replacing it,
That complex, slow planning system.
the political influence of existing homeowners, the sheer unaffordability now for both buying and renting, driven by that gap between wages and prices.
And the decline of that social housing safety net. It's a whole system.
But we also touched on potential ways forward. More social housing, reforming planning, maybe tackling land banking, making renting fairer.
Solutions are there, but they require that political will we discussed. Bold action.
Definitely. Something for you, our listener, to think about perhaps, how does your own housing story fit into this bigger picture? Where do you see the pressures and the potential changes? We hope this conversation continues. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive here on Westferry Times.
Thanks for listening.
And please do subscribe to Westferry Times if you want more explorations like this. Thank you for listening to the deep dive on Westferry Times. Until next time.